just got back from the my doctor's appointment, and I wanted just to kind of offload the experience. I think leaving the appointment was difficult for me. Perhaps it's easy to start from there. I think I was going in for the appointment in regards to my skin condition, some issues with my skin. So I think it was to do with just seeing how the medication was going. Before going into the appointment, I made a short list of other things that I wanted to address, and I was semi-aware of the limited time, but I thought I would still have enough time to kind of share some of my other concerns about my health. I was already anxious going into the appointment because my sleep last night was really difficult, and I can feel the kind of effects of that today just with my mind. So just as when I had the sort of calm day previously, and I think in that morning I slept in a bit, and I could feel the effects of my stress, and walking to surgery was challenging. I didn't have my noise cancelling headphones, and I think when I'm feeling more vulnerable, that was a big challenge. Just dealing with the traffic noises, and there was some sort of worker that was walking past and he shouted something. He was shouting in a distance to somebody else, but it was so close to me that little things like that just sort of added to things. When I got to the surgery, I was quite anxious and on edge, and so that sort of colours the whole experience. So I get sort of flustered about what I want to say. So I went in sort of with the idea of the list, and I kind of sat down and said to the doctor that I'm just going to read this short list of things that I want to try and cover. It's about 4 items, and the doctor mentioned they'd only have time to cover 2 of them, so that was more than understandable with the very limited time available. But I still felt like it'd be best to give them everything and then allow them to sort of say, okay, yeah, we can't do this, but we can do that. So I thought that'd be better than rather than going in with potential time left over that of other situations that could be covered, if that makes sense. I know it doesn't quite make sense, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't want it to be a case of, hey, I've got these other 2 things here, and the doctor may have said, oh, why didn't you mention it? We could have talked about that too. So I wanted to make sure that I would maximise my time there, and the doctor can evaluate, what can be covered in the session and what couldn't be. And they kindly sort of helpfully said, what 2 things would you like to cover out of that list today? And I think one of them was the skin anyway, because that's, I think, the reason for the follow-up. So I mentioned about my heat rash, and it's been a bit difficult with that, and I mentioned my foot pain as well. And the one thing that was forgotten was my psoriasis on my head. And I think what I've sort of learned about the doctor's appointments is that I need to be a bit more active in what I'm going in for the appointment for, and not rely on the doctor to remember to sort of go over things for me. Because I think before going in, I thought, yeah, they're going to check my scalp to see how it's going with the medication, but either that kind of got forgotten with my sort of list and other things. But so there's some learning things I got out of that. Maybe I'll cover leaving the appointment first. So I've got given some more instructions for my skin, and I forgot to mention or ask the question, with my old medication I'm using for my skin, do I still use that or not? So I kind of left the appointment very flustered, and perhaps it's I'm still feeling very flustered now. It's been over an hour since I've appointment gone. I just went to get some groceries, another challenge. So that was a bit of a difficult process while feeling the way I am. But so perhaps some learning points with this is to be really specific and focused with what I'm going in for the GP appointment for, and take sort of as much of an active role as I can for looking out for my own health, because it's nothing bad against a GP or GPs, but not to rely on them to remember all of the things that I'm going through, such as the psoriasis on my scalp. I think if I was to go to do that appointment again, I would make a very short, specific list of, psoriasis on my scalp, my skin condition, and my foot pain. And those are the urgent things. And perhaps maybe be more respectful is not the right word, because I don't think I was being disrespectful, but perhaps be more aware that time is extremely limited in there, and the reasons for the appointment is stick to that area. Don't, unless it's completely urgent, not to introduce other things, because I mentioned the OCD and addictive behaviours, and of course it's quite time consuming to cover that. So there is some learning points there, but the biggest learning point is to create a list of everything that needs to be covered within that specific appointment area. So I was going in there for my skin stuff, so to make sure that those things get covered, so things like my scalp condition won't be forgotten, or it was really hard just to calm myself down and for my mind to know what was happening with my mind, because I can use the word distress, but it's quite a broad word. But my mind was in distress when leaving that appointment, because I was trying to process everything. I think lots of things were going on in my mind at once. There was questions of, okay, what do I do with my old medication? Now you've given me the new stuff. Do I use both? Or so perhaps at the end of appointments I can ask for a short summary or a quick recap to say, okay, am I doing this? But even that takes mental clarity and remembering to do that. So I'm trying to find a middle ground of not being too perfectionistic on handling a GP appointment, but also things I can improve upon as well for next time. So when I have another GP appointment, I can do things that help reduce the distress and help get the most out of the appointment, but also not be too perfectionistic on the other end. But sort of leaving the appointment, I was in a lot of distress. My mind, it was hard to understand what was happening with the mind, whether it was just going a million miles an hour. Sometimes I refer to the symptom of like a really fast moving train, and you can't get on it to access thoughts and process things are just moving all at once. Or it could be a case of the mind also is just thinking so many things at once, which kind of links to that, the speed of it, so I can't access it and slow things down. So I think that was what was happening with my mind. It was kind of trying to move in all directions at once, trying to process many thoughts at once, and I was trying to almost in OCD remedy what was happened. So I kept on going over the appointment in my mind, ruminating. I was kind of trying to soothe myself as well. I was leaning against a wall outside of the supermarket, which was on the way home from the surgery, so I thought I'd get a few things. And I was literally, I had my notes app out on my phone. I was typing in, like, okay, foot pain, you addressed your foot pain, and you got some painkillers for that. And I was kind of trying to go over the appointment to remedy the pain and distress, and to just reframe the appointment. I thought that would be a helpful tool. And maybe there's an OCD implement in there whilst trying to, it's hard to explain. And it was hard to explain to myself what was happening, but it felt, I could sense there was an OCD symptom going in there, or a rumination, which I don't know if that's part of OCD or so I was trying to reframe the appointment outside of the grocery store, and I was kind of going over the same thing over and over. I was saying, I was sort of, because it felt a bit embarrassing as well, that I was given all of these things, and it was perhaps clear that, of course, in a very short appointment you can't cover multiple things. It's yeah, so it's clear I'm kind of still in distress at the moment, so I thought it would be helpful just to record while in the process of this happening, to re-emphasize the learning, some learning points from the appointment. It'd be good just to say it out loud, and sometimes that can sink in differently into my mind. So yeah, I was in a bout of rumination, and it's still the urge to do that is still there, to run through the appointment again and again. And I'm not sure if that's anxiety, OCD, rumination. It's all bundled together, I guess. But I'm not sure what to do with this as well, whether I should communicate this to the doctor on the online system, or well, it feels like it's, I don't know, not pointless, but so yeah, going back to the rumination, I put in my notes, okay, foot pain, and you've got some sort of permission, or I checked with the doctor, say, can I just take painkillers to manage the pain? And I think that's the way to go forward for the moment. The referral to the podiatrist, doctor said it's a long waiting list, so I'm going to try and keep up with the physio exercises. I'm going to try and do that now, after recording this, potentially. And manage it with painkillers and the heat rash stuff. I think I'm just going to take the new, part of it's the old medication, so it's a bit confusing, but there's one cream I was using previously. I'm going to stop using that because the doctor's recommended another moisturising cream, so I'm guessing I don't use the other one. It's all a bit confusing. So even with the points about my, the 2 points that were covered in the surgery, I just felt I was a bit flustered with that. So I forgot to ask about my old medication, and I forgot to mention to doctor check my scalp. So yeah, I said, I guess there is that really good learning lesson, is to stick within the reason for the appointment, stick in that area, and if there's any extra other feeling frustrated because I can't speak clearly and convey what I need to convey right now, but yeah, if there's any other health concerns outside of the reason for the appointment. So the reason for the appointment is my skin condition. So anything outside of that, like binge eating, OCD, is to mention it, but perhaps create a separate appointment for that potentially. That could be something to do. I think the doctor did say something about mentioning these things to her when the issues come up. So I'm not sure if that means to go onto the online system and make a separate appointment in that way for it, versus save it all up for that one appointment. I think that's maybe what she was referring to. And so stick within the appointment sort of reasons, the area for the appointment, stick within that area, and also be a bit more responsible. It's a harsh word because it wasn't irresponsible, but perhaps trying to say this in a way that's soothing, that's not self-critical, or it doesn't add more distress to me, but maybe take a bit more of an active, or not to rely, to rely more on myself is perhaps a positive way to do it, about in regards to what needs to be covered in the GP session. So for example, if I was to have this appointment again, I would write, the heat rash, the foot pain, two very things that need to be addressed immediately, even though the foot pain is not linked to that, but it's an urgent thing that needs to be addressed, and it's also one extra thing, so it's not a huge, it's within the reasonable understanding to fit that into the appointment. And also ask about my old medication and my sort of scalp condition as well. I guess the old medication would require me to think on my feet, which is very difficult for me to do. It's not something I could have pre-planned for that, so it's only afterwards that question I realised it would have been useful to ask. And I'm really aware that the doctor only has a very limited time, and I could sense the hurriedness of the doctor as well, and that's not a criticism, that's just a reality of the healthcare at the moment system, where everything is strained, and every department feels like it's strained, every area. Even with the podiatrist, there's a long waiting list for that, and mental health is probably, I'm on the waiting list for autism test and EMDR, and there's a huge waiting list for that. I don't think there's a way for me to avoid the distress, really. It's just, I don't think there was really. I think either way, I probably could have minimised it with knowing what I know now, to sort of limit the scope of the consultation of going in there. But I feel like, maybe. Yeah, so it's hard to kind of, it feels I'm trying to go into the mind to soothe it, but perhaps the soothing needs to be happening outside of the mind, to be, using mindfulness and to be present. But I think when the mind's in this sort of distressed way, there's like a huge energy, maybe it's from the mind itself, of wanting to pull you into that, to kind of try and sort things out, when probably the solution is to not forget about it, but to step out of the mind. As much as there's this strong urge to kind of get stuck in the mind and sort things out, I think maybe it's better to try and go into like a mindful energy and allow the mind to settle. Perhaps that's something to go forward for the rest of the day. So I think that's what I'm going to try and do. I think sometimes the mind doesn't like that. It wants, I think, well, in a sense, it wants the attention. It wants to keep my energy there to like replay things over and over to try and sort it out. But so I think it's best for me to be aware of this and just try and be mindful of my energy, mindful of the distress, and allow it to soothe itself, I think. Because it feels like I've extracted what's needed to be extracted from the situation in regards to how to approach things next time, in the next GP appointment. And I don't think replaying things is going to be useful for me to do, as much as there's a temptation and the urge of my mind to do that, to say, to try and soothe it. I think it's best to allow it to fizzle out in its own way, as much as I'm able to do that. I'm grateful I've got some awareness to try and remain in a mindful energy, which I'm going to try and do for the rest of the let's just say for the immediate moment. I'm going to try and remain there as my mind does what it needs to do to go through things. Just on a random note, on the way back home with my headphones, I was listening to some anxiety sort of meditation music, but it was so soft and so, with the noise of traffic and everything else, it was too loud for me to hear the music. So I ended up putting on some jazz music, which I haven't listened to in a long while, just because I know it's loud and it would help block out the noise and things. So it was nice kind of revisiting an artist that I haven't listened to in a long time, and that was a positive thing, that I may listen to more of the jazz music, especially during when the mind's distressed. You can sometimes counter that with the spontaneity of that genre of jazz. It keeps you that helped a little bit, I think, just to get my attention onto something. Some jazz can really grab you and keep you there, which is quite handy, almost like what's one of those, I think it's called a weighted blanket. Sometimes it's like that. It can really, keep your attention there and keep you contained a little bit. So it was as a positive thing I managed to listen to. And one of the reasons why I didn't take my noise cancelling headphones is because there was a chance of rain, and with these noise cancelling headphones, the panels on the side, the ear cups, the ones I've got are sensors, so you can actually use it to swipe to go to the next track, or swipe up to do the volume. And when it's raining and I've got my hood up, it seems to interfere more and more now with my music, so it will keep pausing the music as the ear cup touches the material of the hood. So it's a bit of a problem I need to address, or get a solution to that, whether it's to get a separate pair of headphones for when it's raining, because got them here actually. These are the headphones that I'm wearing. They're kind of just a standard Bluetooth on-ear headphones, and these are the ones I took with me today to wear, so in case it was raining there wouldn't be any interference with the touch panel. But I noticed that maybe as my health's gone on worse, that these are, even with loud music, I probably need something else to help when I'm outside and it's raining. Feels like something I need to put some conscious thought into, when I have to make decisions and process things, it can be a distressful activity. It strains my mind to do that. If my mind's already strained as it is now, you can get into rumination and pockets of difficult thoughts of, should I get this or should I buy that? And that whole decision process, which I find difficult to do, and to process things. So maybe I should leave that for a time when my mind is calmed down. Feel a little bit calmer now than when I first started recording. I think just re-acknowledging the space of trying to be present and mindful, that's helpful to kind of pull me out of that distressing, chaotic thought energy of what's still there, and allowing that to kind of fizzle out as I try and remain mindful. So I'm going to continue doing that now. So I think for the rest of the day, as a side note quickly, I mentioned that when listening to the jazz, it maybe got some of my juices flowing for spoken word poetry. I've got a separate channel for spoken word poetry. I don't often upload to it, so it's not actually, I don't include it in a description or anything, but it's called a spoken word therapy. It's funny that I came up with that name a while back before this channel, Therapeutic Space, so still got that link to it. I think at the time I wanted it to be a therapeutic space there, so maybe it's kind of nice. I forgot about that name that I had, so maybe it got me with listening to the jazz. With the artist I was listening to is Grace Kelly. I think it's a young jazz musician and singer as well. So I was listening to her music, and I may listen to more of it, and it just sort of inspired me to maybe write, to do a therapeutic spoken word about what's going on with me at the moment. So I may potentially be brave and sit out in the garden here to do some writing, maybe, and maybe write a new spoken word piece and see if I'm able to record it, some spoken word in some ways. I think in immediate time, maybe it's best just to try and ground myself. I think that's a good thing to do. So sometimes I want to jump into something else, like with the headphones, sort out my headphones situation, or even spoken word poetry can take a lot of mental energy to do. So maybe it's wise when my mind's distressed, it's wise to maybe calm it down first, ground myself before deciding what activity to do. Because I feel like right now I'm still in that off balance, distressed state. So if I go into spoken word, sometimes it could be nice where that chaotic energy can channel into creativity, but sometimes there's a side effect to it as well, where it can strain the mind even more, even if you're in that creative pocket with that energy, but it can also be in more distressful and straining the mind. So so perhaps it's good just to take a moment just for some space before knowing what other actions to do in the afternoon. So hopefully that's enough just to calm down and ground myself. Maybe that's all I need to focus on right now, and then leave the rest of the afternoon aside for the moment. Perhaps that's a good place for me to start, I think.